Welcome to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience-backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have. Hey there, it's Chris from Leading the Way. I am so excited to be here with you again on the podcast with this time my amazing guest, Dr. Michael Gerharz. Dr. Gerharz, thanks so much for being here. Very excited to have you.
Hi, Chris. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I know a little bit about you, but the rest of my viewers and listeners don't. So let me tell them a little bit about your zone of brilliance and what you do so well. So Dr. Gerharz helps leaders all over the world find the right words so they can make a bigger impact. It's so important. He's the author of The Aha Effect and the Leaders of the Path Manifesto. He's got a blog, The Art of Communicating, that has over 1,000 published posts. And he's the host of his own podcast called Irresistible Communication. So glad to have you here with us today. And what an important topic, being able to communicate well. What things are you seeing, in the world right now in terms of leaders' abilities to communicate or not? Are we getting better at that as leaders? Are we getting worse? A little bit of each?
I would say we're getting better. There's such a wealth of coaching and free how-tos available currently, and so many people speaking about those things.
Yes.
That there's really a body of knowledge that just wasn't available like 50 years ago, let alone like 100 years ago, where people basically were just referring back to Aristotle and Cicero, just repeating those things. But today we have brilliant YouTube channels and blogs and social media channels that just give you a different perspective, and that give you a perspective that fits to your personality, and that make you kind of pause and reflect on, hold on a minute, is that really what's clicking with my team? Is that really what's going to resonate with my audiences? And so there's just so much more possibility to reflect nowadays that I do think. So I'm optimistic. So
yeah. No, I agree. And I like how you just said resonate. The right words or the words that resonate with your audience can really shape how you're perceived and how your outcomes are. I know you talk about that quite a bit. Tell me more a little bit about that, how the right words can kind of make or break your message as a leader.
Yeah. That is really one of my favorite topics, right? And it's basically the reason why I wrote my first book, The Aha Effect. So, because I observed that basically the whole communication industry is so focused on persuading and wowing your audience, and so kind of teaching you how to put a spotlight on yourself and how to get your audience to appreciate your own brilliance, when they couldn't care less about that, right? Because
Right.
They've got a life of their own, and they would much rather have you talk about how they can get even more brilliant in their lives. And so rather than trying to persuade them, I think you're much better positioned to kind of get their attention when you start to resonate with what matters to them. So that you kind of find the overlap, and when you find that sweet spot, then they are much more open to listen to you, and
Right.
they are much more eager to engage in a conversation with you. So you don't have to try as hard to persuade them of your take when you understand their take and find the common ground, to find language that actually resonates with what already matters to them.
Oh, so well said. I mean, and as you're saying that too, it sounds like a shift from a lot of speakers, even experienced ones, can kind of go into this performance mode and they get high anxiety and they think they're performing a show, right? Or being an actor in a big movie or something. And really what it sounds like you're suggesting is if they can get them to a place of service, like I'm here to serve this audience and enable them, it's a totally different energy and a totally different communication, right?
Absolutely. That is spot on. There's so much so much advice out there on how to deal with that anxiety. But to me, that feels like it's just, well, treating the symptoms rather than the cause. And actually, to me, it often feels like it's only adding to the stress. Because, well, these are often things that you have to do on top of actually speaking, like, for example, remembering to breathe, remembering eye contact, how to stand, how to hold your hands, and all of that on top of what you actually want to say,
Right.
which might be the core of the problem here, right? Because you might be using words that your marketing department wrote for you, or that some coach said you should be using because they sound trendy,
Mm,
but they don't really come natural to you. So it kind of there's kind of a disconnect between you and the words that you use, and so all of those body language hacks have to work against that. But when you
right.
start right from the beginning and try to find words that you truly believe in about things that you deeply care about, then you're going to be much more calm and comfortable. When you then do that from a perspective of serving the audience, as you mentioned,
Right.
then that's a whole different game. You can step off the hero's pedestal, don't have to impress that much.
Yeah. It's just anytime I've been able to click into that, and there are times I haven't as a leader, and I've seen others too. It's so much more fun. It's so much more engaging, and the likelihood of a follow-up, which is what most of us want out of a speaking engagement, some sort of follow-up or connection with the audience, is more likely, right, than um, something that's really like a show or like a movie, right? While that's fun and entertaining, it doesn't really move us forward in conversation or engagement, or if you're looking to book sales or move a project along or something concrete like that, it's probably less likely, right, if you're not coming from a place of service.
Yeah, exactly. And so and if you then add to that kind of that urge to be right all the time and to show up
Mm.
as kind of the smartest guy in the room, um, that just kills off kind of every conversation. Well, why that's exactly what we want to achieve, right? That it's not like we say make our statement and then everyone's going to be convinced, or that we make our pitch and then that's the deal done. But we much rather want to engage in a conversation, and for that we need to open up the possibility for our audience to be smart, to even feel smarter than us, and then to
Mm.
engage in conversations with us.
Right, right. I love it. It's such a different energy, and it's honestly just more fun thinking about that. And
Yeah.
do you find, when you're working with clients and coaching people and writing about this, is it a lot, is it a lot more time to do this? Do people have to be like teaching experts or anything like that? Or is it just a few small tweaks that get people there?
I think the biggest shift is that you become curious again, right?
Mm.
That you are not so focused on getting your point across,
Ah,
but start with listening to the others first and where they are coming from. Because when you know where they are coming from, it's
yeah.
much easier to build a bridge to where you want them to get, right? Or to find a place where they actually want to get and then build that bridge from where they are. But if you don't start from a point of curiosity and listening, you might just end up building any bridge or any road that leads anywhere, and then it's just pure luck if it's the right one. And that's
Ah,
actually what happens to some of the sales teams that I know, right? That who
mm,
would rather throw out like 100 mediocre pitches
right.
instead of listening and focusing on 10 or even just five um, of the most important ones, really nailing that because they engage in a conversation first, try to understand first, be curious about what's the actual struggle here and how can we build that bridge.
Nice, nice. And I'm curious, as you're talking about this too, many, if not most people, use some sort of slide deck, PowerPoint, what have you, with their presentation. Does this shape how you build, create that? Because I think anyone listening can agree, just putting raw notes and reading those is done. That was done decades ago and should probably never have been done. But once we're past that, is there a style, high level, to create a presentation that matches this sort of I'm here to serve you, I'm here to listen to you approach.
Uh, totally. I mean, first of all, we should clarify what we actually mean by presentation, because there's a lot of meanings attached to it. For some people, presentations are kind of documents that we send along, right? But
Mm,
if we're speaking like presentation in terms of slides that are meant to be shown why we speak,
right.
then there's definitely um, some things that we can derive from what we just identified. Because, well, if if you show up to be helpful for your audience, then that's the guiding principle for how to design the slides. So the question is not to just fill up slides that are shown behind me, but to think about in what way would that slide enhance what I have to say. Because I mean, the
Mm,
reason that we're meeting is because of what I have to say. Because if it wasn't for me, if there's nothing that I would be adding to the content, then I could just send over the document. So there must be a reason that I'm in the room. And so the slide's purpose is to make it easier for our audience to get the point, to see kind of the complexity, to be more memorable, to make it easier for them to relate, to compare that to things that they are familiar with. So and if you can find a reason for why and in what way that slide serves your audience to follow you
mm,
along,
mm.
um, then that might be a good reason to either do without the slide or maybe just um, look for a better slide that does that.
Right, right. And well said. It's so helpful out there. And I suppose you could even make the comment, do you even need slides at all? But that's probably a whole other discussion because sometimes you might not need them as much as people
Sure,
have gotten used to them.
sure.
Even though they're visual learners out there, and there's lots of arguments to be made to use both. But yeah, that's important. I know you talk a bit about, and this is really similar, the great communication, whether it's a presentation, a live one, or just a communication with your team at work or vendors or partners. You talk about it being the right type of communication, but not about being right. Can you tell me more what you mean by that?
Um, so yeah, what I can observe is, and what you've probably observed too, is that so many communicators in a business context are concerned with being right,
Mm,
be it in a customer sales relationship or in a meeting where kind of different roles clash, and then we're immediately about defending our positions and defending why our arguments are the right way of looking at things. So, in summary, why we are right with
mm,
how we look at that. Um, when in the end the world outside couldn't care less about that, right? Because I mean, how many ideas have died in a meeting room due to a status clash? Because
right.
we somehow thought that we're the more senior person, and so we should have the final say when actually the junior had the way better argument.
Right.
And so if we just switch that perspective and once again step off that hero's pedestal of having to be the one who's got all the answers, and much more try to become the one who's willing to figure out the answer, who's
Mm,
driving the process of not giving in until we've discovered the best idea, regardless of whose idea it was. So,
nice.
in other words, if we switch from being right to getting it right,
Mm,
we're much better positioned to get more innovative solutions, to get a more engaged team,
right.
to get quicker times to market, and many more benefits.
Right. Right. And yeah, it's a lot safer place to be too, right? People are more likely to show up where their idea might not be the one that goes, but at least they know they'll be heard, right? And
Exactly.
they can riff off of other people's ideas because in brainstorming that's so important. One idea begets another, and we kind of grow from that. So no, I love
Yeah, and,
that.
and and if that's our perception that this is a place where best ideas win, we might just have an incentive to try harder and come up with better ideas. But if
Right.
it's ever only about status, then no amount of effort will make our ideas hurt, right?
Right.
So that's just the right incentive to get into a much more constructive work environment.
No, it's and you said it so well. It's sort of similar to like, are you going for compliance and we're just going to agree to the authority figure? And there's a time and place for that, and certain worlds. It's not saying that we never do that, but then there's the are you going for resilience? Do you really want growth that supports your company and your environment, and not to have that all be on your shoulders as a leader? And I think very clearly you have to come from a service perspective, and be open to ideas for that to happen. I mean, it's just how our brains are wired.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm curious too, as a leader, how can we help our teams be better presenting their stories, right? That the more we can build them up, the less we have to be in the spotlight ourselves as well. Do you cover that, how leaders can kind of help almost coach their teams to be better communicators?
Um, I'd say that one of the best ways to do that is to turn speaking with clarity into a habit and to
Mhm.
make a question like, so what do you mean? Um, a a standard tool that's used in your meeting and that nobody should ever feel ashamed of asking. So I don't understand that. Could you explain it in a different way?
Uh,
What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And so that we get used to as a team to finding simpler ways and more relatable language, more understandable ways of articulating our ideas so that we don't actually delegate that task of figuring out what we mean to the team. I mean, it's likely made of up of smart people, so they can
right.
do that for us, and most likely they will, and they are used to do that in many companies. But we can save so much time and effort for the actually important work if we just nurture that habit and
Mm,
find ways of actually starting with that simple and clear language.
right.
And I think one of the best ways to get there is to make that question, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. It's
A,
such an
a
important one. I've seen it, most of my career is in the technical world, and we can think we're being really clear because the movie in our head is really clear. I mean, it's crystal clear there, but what's
yeah,
actually coming out of our mouth might not be that movie, or, people aren't able to see it. It can be frustrating if you're a very visual person and you're trying to communicate an idea and people aren't
absolutely.
getting it. It's because you've got the movie and they don't yet, right? Or maybe there's a different movie you can
Mm,
co-create with them,
mm.
but I've seen that so many times. Or these are all well-intentioned people. They misunderstand. They have their own movie, so they're filtering it how they think it should be done, versus what you're trying to go for. And then people are surprised 3 weeks later, 3 months later, when the
And
solution
that
comes out and it's off target.
and then that's a totally human trait, right? So there's nothing wrong with either side here. I
Right.
think Miles Davis, the jazz musician, once said it like in a brilliant way. He said, "If you understood everything I say, you'd be me." And so
Nice.
it's just natural that there's some things that we don't understand, and even if we, as you point out, as visual learners, even if we see the same thing, like
Yeah.
when you say blue, I see the same kind of blue, then it still lands on a different foundation of the experiences that I made
Mm,
and the conclusions that I've drawn from that and the values that I've grown up with. And so even if kind of the mere factual things are exactly the same on both sides and we agree on the same things, it might still be that we draw different conclusions there.
right. I love it. Shifting gears here a little bit, just a pattern I notice in outside of the corporate world and outside of the place where we're serving. There's a heavy influence on, and it's almost in this, I would say, almost even a manipulation space of some sort of soundbite or hook or something to get us to click, because the
Mhm.
click sells views and the views sells advertising, and we all get caught up in this cycle. And whether it's through our scroll on social media and the interrupt there, or sadly on what's happening on TV that probably really isn't news anymore and hasn't been for decades, but it gets us to click. That's a very different style of communication. And if we look at that, the goal of service is very different. I would almost argue, and I might be wrong in this, but the goal is to serve the advertisers to get more views to their ads versus I want to share a piece of information that's important. I'm curious from your perspective, does that seem, are you seeing that pattern as well, or am I off target in my crazy assumptions there?
I'm actually not sure whether that's a totally new thing. I mean, we
Okay.
had Boulevard magazines all the time. It's just way more pronounced, right? And
Mm,
the incentives are way higher today than they were a couple of decades back. And so
right.
our the amount of these types of communication um, that we're seeing throughout the day is way larger than it used to be. Um, so, but the way that I tend to look at that is that um, that's just the game we're in, right? So there's not much use in complaining about that.
Okay.
In a way, I would argue the audience that the audience owes us nothing, right? So
Mm, mm,
we're not we're not entitled to anyone's attention just because we think that we have the more solid and grounded topic to speak about, or that we've got the better product, the better story, the better researched article, or the higher quality product. We're not
mm.
entitled to anybody's attention just because we think that that our story is in some way superior to those clickbait style stories.
Right, right.
And so I think the only way to get along with that is to just get better at telling your own story,
Ah,
to find a way to craft brilliant hooks, but in a truthful way.
mm,
To be just as good as the clickbaiters in coming up with interesting first lines, but as opposed to them, when you continue and when the people actually click on your story, keep your promises, actually
mm.
deliver something, or even over deliver with something that the audience really didn't expect because they are so used to being trapped into that clickbait. And when
Right.
that happens, you might just have one fan who tells their friends about the brilliance of your channel as opposed to the clickbaiters channel.
Right. Oh, I love it. And doesn't feel duped afterwards, right? When that trough of disillusionment happens
Yeah.
in so many cases. No, I love it. That's so powerful. Um, you've helped us so much already with knowing how to approach things, speaking as a place of service and being genuine and focusing on listening, connecting with the audience. Uh, are there any other sort of quick tips? This work has a long tail, and to get better at it, requires constant work and mastery. But anything else you want to add as a hey, if you do nothing else this next week as a leader when you present, do this. Anything come to mind?
Um, I think one of the most important topics that I've done a lot of work in recent times on is strategy communication, which is something that every leader kind of comes across almost periodically. Like there are often these annual strategy retreats
Yes.
where that often feel high energy, where we're once again pumped about the brilliance of our vision and even come up with even smarter strategies than we used to have. But then, like a couple of weeks in, everyone ends up being frustrated. All the
Mm,
energy has faded, and well, everything's just back to normal because, well, in the end, the team just didn't get exactly what that new strategy actually is and what
mm,
it means for their everyday.
mm.
And I think that there's a very helpful framework or almost checklist um, that I've distilled in my new book, The Path to Strategic Impact, the PATH framework, which consists of just 4 quick checks. So, is your strategy communication plain and simple? So, do you use a language that everyone on your team actually can understand?
Mm,
Or is it mostly tech jargon or consultant speak? Secondly, is it actionable? So, do we understand what it means for their everyday actions? Is it transformative? So, does it actually not only lead the team to follow the rules, but actually to make bold choices and make leaps and do that with conviction. And H, is it heartfelt? So do we do that passionately? Does that align with personal motivations of the team? So plain and simple, actionable, transformative, heartfelt path.
Nice.
And if we check those four boxes, then I think we have a much better chance of actually getting from bold vision, smart strategy to action on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up your book. We'll certainly put that in the show notes. So if you're on the treadmill or driving, please don't do anything dangerous because they're there for you after this. But highly recommend you check that out because it sounds like even just a little bit of energy. I know people are busy and sometimes picking up a book can feel overwhelming, but even just 5-10 minutes on that will really transform how you show up and how you serve and then the results you enjoy on the other side. So I really encourage folks to check that out. You're clearly an expert in this space and clearly seek to serve others to do better, doing just what you share as the approach. You do it yourself. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, the good news is it's a quick read, so it's just 120 pages. So
oh, nice.
It fits nicely in a cross border flight or cross.
Yeah. Absolutely. You could read it a few times and get even smarter. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for you for being crisp with that. That helps folks get to the result faster.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I always love to ask my guests, what's something you're very thankful or grateful about today?
Today, I've had a nice conversation this morning where people didn't bother to give me answers but questions.
Ooh.
And that felt very caring to me at that moment, as if people that those people weren't concerned with kind of getting across as smart or helpful, but just caring for what matters to me and helping me figure out a way forward that works for me, rather than that's just a smart sounding piece of advice that they picked up somewhere else.
Nice.
That works for others, but not necessarily for everyone else.
Nice. That's so powerful. And that's a great message for every coach and consultant out there, is not to pigeonhole your client into a formula. We're not robots on an assembly line. So that's great. I love that. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate you sharing your brilliance with the world here. And I encourage everyone listening to check out your work in the show notes and get your book and take action. You can take action right away. And even if it's a little bit messy at first, that's okay. That means you're making progress and it's real. So, stay with it. And please subscribe, like, do all those things so you make sure you don't miss an episode with other phenomenal guests like this one. And thank you for leading the way. Thanks so much for being on, Dr. Gerharz.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.